This is probably the first tree that I ever bought for bonsai. I've had it over 10 years and last year it got a very nice pot. I reduced the pot, I planted it up and I failed. The tree is slightly wobbly in the pot, so I didn't do all that much to it last year. I let all the pads just grow, I didn't wire, I didn't prune, and actually the trunk didn't get enough attention either. So what I'm going to do in this video is renovate this tree back to its original glory. I'm going to check the deadwood, I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to prune back the foliage pads of this Junipers. I think it is a squamata. It is a needle type juniper. Trim it back, wire it out, take it out of the pot, look at the roots. Let's get started. Right, the deadwood has been cleaned. I've put lime sulfur or yin liquid over it. It is now bleached out and this is nice and protected again against fungal infections for the rest of the year. Now the next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, I'm going to look at all these pads and I'm going to take out all the branches that have grown out and are actually too long. What I want is I want the pads to be thin at the end, so I might actually have to wire some of the young branches out and then prune them so that they form nice domes in the tree with individual delineations. Also what you'll see, there's lots and lots of flowers in the tree and all these flowers I would like to take out. This is one of these examples of a branch that has grown out that I'm really not going to use. It comes out from the middle of the tree. This can completely go and then I'll wire the side branches out. When wiring these type of coniferous trees, you always need to go inside the pads and you'll see there is yellow and brown needles. These all need to go. Then you'll find that these grow with their branches in little clumps. Also these clumps need to go. Now when pruning a needle juniper like this, there's a couple of things that you need to remember so that you don't ruin your tree. One of them, and probably the most important one, is that if you remove all the green from a branch, there is no more backbudding. So if I cut this little branch all the way here up to the barked over areas, I will not get a bud here anymore. However, if I have a healthy branch and I clip into the green, like that, I will get buds here between the needles. Most of the time, not always. But most of the time this is a fairly safe thing to do, assuming the rest of the pad is healthy. It is not just a matter of smoothly clipping everything off. The moment you clip through a needle, that needle will go brown within a couple of weeks and you get brown spots everywhere. So as you are pruning, you take your scissors, you put it in between the needles and you put your scissor just over the branch and just clip the branch itself. You don't clip the needles. In a foliage pad, you normally have a transition from very narrow to very thick. So what you do is you trim the ends of a pad more, so they end up with one growing tip normally at the end, than the bottom where you have upward growing tips and they fill out the pad so that you get a dome shape in profile like you have here. Just a few leaves at the edge and multiple branches filling up the inside of the pad. That's basically the whole concept of pruning these kinds of junipers. So if you do this throughout the tree, what you get is quite a smooth looking surface, even though the individual tips are not all of equal length. And in between you have a few points where I've made the cuts. But this whole pad will remain filled. It will continue on growing, but now only with bifurcations rather than with clumps. Here is actually still a clump. Now I'm going to remove the middle tip, just like that. Normally I prune this tree once a year at least and I take out all the long extension growth. Now if you look here, I haven't done this last year, so you see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 long branches that have grown up. I don't want 4 branches here, I just want 1. So I'm going to remove the middle tip here. I am still left with 2 long branches. Now if I look carefully here, you can see this long branch actually has bifurcation and I can reduce this to here. This one does not have bifurcation, and I also don't need the extension growth because there's a foliage pad right below it. So here I'm just going to remove it all the way back to the first 5 or 6 needles. Just like that. Then this can branch out, and this I'll use to fill up this part of the pad. And lower down there is also growth. And this growth is actually going inward, so I don't want to let it extend, but I also don't want to clip it off completely because I need some foliage on the inside. I'm just going to remove a part. This, in theory, I can now wire out and place like this. Check, there's nothing here. Here we do the same thing. I hope you can still see this on screen. Remove the middle growth, so you have a bifurcation. So applying this throughout the tree gets you a pad like this, where all the foliage is evenly distributed. You can see through the pad slightly, but not all that much, allowing light to enter on the inside. The branches can grow, and next year I can trim it back very short again. If you have multiple pads that have started to grow into each other, then be careful and check where does the growth come from. So here there is growth coming from the bottom, from the pad down below, which is fine, can trim that back. But here you also see growth going down, and I don't want any growth going down, so these are removed as close to the base as possible, so it doesn't easily return. Same here, this is one that's growing down. I could wire it, but I don't need it. So I can just trim it off, and the same all the way in the back. So that I create a little bit of space again, which optically increases the interest of the tree. It just looks like there's more small pads, rather than having one continuous closed green mass. I try to keep a little bit of space in between. And if you have too much time in your life, you can then also take off these small needles that are growing down from the branches above to create an even bigger optical space. Actually, it's not just an optical space, it's actual space. Here another little bit coming down. And use all the tools that you have, right? Also the ones that are on your hands all the time. Partially through the process you can see here the top pads have all been worked and this one has not. There's been no wire applied to the top yet because the branching underneath is mature and stable, and therefore just by pruning I get a nice shape back. So what I hope that you can see here is that on the bottom of the branch you see the main branch, and it branches off in multiple smaller branches that stand out like a hand, and on that hand is where all the green extension growth is growing up. That means if you have this set up properly as a main structure, the years after that, you can just prune back for a very long time, and every year just wire 1 or 2 branches. Like this one has come up, and this I would like to wire out and down, and here as well. And that way you build a bigger pad, allowing more branches to grow out from the inner side, filling the pad even more. So for the wiring out I am using very, very thin copper wire. And effectively what you do is you go in and you find the base of the branch. Hopefully there's 2 branches coming off, and you just wire that out. Naturally, before you do that, you should clean out all these dead needles. Otherwise you're wiring the dead needles in place. And the dead needles are exactly what stops the backbudding from occurring. So you take the old needles off, and yes, this really is an annoying little piece of work, but it needs to be done for good backbudding. Make sure that you don't trap needles as much as possible, and think about how long you want the pad to be, because you don't need to use all the green, of course. So that's one. Same here, trying to go in between the needles. And as this is just about positioning horizontally, I'm not too worried about exact perfect looping. I just want to keep the branches in place. Just like that. And do this for the whole pad. And of course then once it is wired you can say, well, here I want to stop at the bifurcation. Take the middle one out. There's quite a few branches here. I'm taking one out here. Then I've got 1 bifurcation, 1 side branch. That's pretty good. This I'm going to leave in place. Same here. How far do I want the pad to go? Well, this is the outline, so this is all enough. Here there's multiple branches and I'm taking 1 of the 2 off. And now I can actually bring it back into position placing them a little bit closer to each other, slowly building the pad. And this little back budding that you see here on all these branches, this is what we want. In fact, there's a long branch here coming out in between with two nice side branches, and I'm going to just remove this from the middle. Now I shouldn't clip on the wrong spot. So now this is gone, the long branch. And what we're left with are these two young sprouts, and they will replace the one long shoot. Here the same thing, I have a bifurcation and I take the middle shoot out. This way I get rejuvenation, I get bifurcation, therefore intensity increase of the number of sprouts in the trunk, in the foliage pad, densifying the foliage pad, causing back budding here on the inside because sunlight penetrates, and giving these small sprouts on the inside a chance to grow. The pads have all been pruned back. They might not be in their final position. I've not finished wiring it yet, and the reason is visible this way. You see that it is standing very slanted in the pot, and I'm not convinced that what now looks like the front, roughly this, is the best front. Yes, the Nabari is nice and white, but the Deadwood is coming towards you, which is basically the dead parts of the tree pointing towards you, which is not a nice thing. It's nicer if the Deadwood would go away from me, but that would require the tree being potted up roughly like this, which is an option if I look at the foliage. It would not look too bad. I might have to rewire a little bit, but yeah, pop me a comment. I'm just going to take it out of the pot. I'm going to repot it, plant it up a little bit straighter and a little bit better because it's a little bit wiggly. And I can still put a wire in later in this year. So let me know, what do you think? Is this the front? Front number one? Or are we going to go for the reverse of the tree? Front number two, and we'll flip it up a little bit straighter like this. I've removed a lot of the substrate. I've not trimmed any roots yet, and you can see the root ball is very, very shallow. Here it is really only a centimeter or two. There's a few long ends which I'm just going to prune off. Here's another long root. So that's all I'm going to prune off the roots, because I'm going to plant it pretty much straight on the bottom of the pot. I'm not cleaning it. I'm planning on just putting it flat with the base almost directly on the pot. That way there's more substrate to hold it. You can tell all the living roots are down low, except here. This is a living root. This and this are also living roots, but that is dead. Here is a living root. And then everything else is down below. So it's going to be a bit of an odd tree with a big hollow here. This would be nice if I could secure it like this. Now I'm going to use a little trick to do this. And the trick that I'm going to use has to do with the fact that this pot has 4 attachment points and that I collected some of the fireworks last year. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make these fireworks pieces long enough to be attached by these 4 contact points, just like this. This might actually be a little bit too long still. Make it a little bit shorter. Right, and I'll make another one just like that. So now what we can do, if we take the root ball, right, and this moves back and forth, but we slide this in between the roots, and we do the same thing here in between the roots, then we can wire these chopsticks effectively, because you can just use chopsticks, down in the pot on both points, and then you attach it so firmly that it won't wiggle anymore. It is of course a little bit of an iffy thing, because you need to get the wires out, you need to get the chopsticks underneath them, but it does work. So this is one side, and now we need to make sure that this one, where the wires here, goes all the way here to this one. And the same on the other side, and then I'll tighten them. First connect all the connection points, because otherwise you can't later on. And here the same challenge of course. try and get the piece of wood in place, wires over it. There we go. I can fill it up further. In theory I should clip this off, but this is a way to attach a tree to a pot if you don't have a lot of good roots that are solidly connected to the trunk. Right, potted up, watered, fixed. I now actually should clean up the deadwood again. Maybe add a bit more yin fluid, but I'll leave that for later. I'm not going to wire the branches anymore. I'm still debating whether this is a good front or not. Let me see. Something like this. Then the deadwood is pointing away. You have a very nice nebari. Most of the foliage is reasonably well aligned. I think this is going to be the front of the future tree.